OMDC, I think most of you know who we are, but just really briefly, we are the agency in Ontario that is responsible for economic development in the province in the creative industries. So literally our job is to help your industries grow, and we do that through a variety of programs and services and tax credits and initiatives like IFF. And in terms of supporting the independent feature film industry in Ontario, the combination of competitive tax credits, great location support, great crews, great infrastructure, all of this contributes to building a really, really strong industry in Ontario. And in 2011, we had our best year ever. We had $1.3 billion of production activity in the province, and we're basically on track to have another really amazing year again. So hopefully, what I wish for you today is essentially that as you have your meetings and make those connections, that your project becomes much closer to the screen, and that when you do get there, you bring your project back to Ontario. And so with that, I wish you a great day and a half, and I'll turn it back over to Jen. Thank you.
I'll be very quick. I just want to introduce Wendy Mitchell, the brand new, newly minted, very exciting editor of Screen International. She's going to be moderating the panel today with FilmNation, Beachside, and Alda Misa.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Wendy Mitchell. I'm the editor of Screen International. I'm American, but based in London. Not that that really matters, but we're all international here, so you have that information. I'm just going to introduce the panelists to join me up here. We've got Michael Clark from Big Beach / Beachside, their new lower budget arm. And we'll welcome Milan Popelka, close, from FilmNation. And last but not least, Jerry Hofstetter from Alda Misa. Yes. And I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves fairly briefly and tell you a bit about their backgrounds and what you're up to now at your respective new or semi-new companies. Great, it's Michael.
Hi, everybody.
I think it's there.
Hello. Hi, guys. I'm Michael Clark. I've done IFF sort of on the here at Spice Road the past few years, but it's nice to be back in this capacity doing the panel. So thank you, Jan, for having me. I work at a company called Beachside. We're a new company. We sort of spun off in the past few months from a company called Big Beach, which is based in New York, which is a production and finance company. And our goal is to focus in that, what some people call the micro budget sector, which is a sort of roughly $1 million and under space. And we're trying to find new ways to produce, to finance, and also potentially distribute in that world. And we're excited by it. So.
And is there anything current that you're working on?
No, actually, the past few months we've just been taking meetings and trying to figure out our slate.
Okay. But maybe you can remind us of a few Big Beach.
So the Big Beach.
Little Bit
So
Sunshine.
the most recent movie, actually, what kind of spawned this was this movie called Safety Not Guaranteed, which we produced at Big Beach. Film District released it earlier this year. It stars Aubrey Plaza, Mark Duplass, Jake Johnson. And that's what got us excited about this. Prior to that at Big Beach, Big Beach has done Little Miss Sunshine, Our 88 Brothers, Sunshine Cleaning, Jack Goes Boating, Away We Go. I'm probably forgetting a few in there, but and those movies are all a little bit larger budget. Safety Not Guaranteed was under $1 million.
Great. Milan, please.
Hello. Also want to say thank you for having us. Very happy to be here. My name is Milan. I'm the COO at FilmNation. We are a sales agency, production development company, and now newly financier. Films generally in the $5 to $40 million range. We're based in New York, but we have offices in LA as well. We are most well known for our sales agency, partly because that's something when you start a sales agency, you can dive in, find movies, and go to market, and people know what you do. With production and development, it takes a little bit longer to get up and running, but we have a few movies releasing this year and then next year, so we feel pretty soon we'll kind of be seen equally as both. We focus on all kinds of movies. I think the movies that we have here at the Toronto Film Festival kind of are a good sampling of that. We have everything from Looper, which opened the festival on Thursday. We have Terrence Malick's next movie, To the Wonder, which is premiering on Monday. Deepa Mehta's Midnight's Children, which I think came out of this program as well. And then Eli Roth's horror thriller Aftershock. So that's what really brings us here. We're also selling new product and also looking for new projects as well.
Great, thank you. Jerry.
One thing Milan is not telling you is FilmNation is probably one of the preeminent sales companies in the world. Hi, I'm Jerry Hausfeder. Thank you for having me. I am the COO of a company called Aldemisa. What does that mean? It's 4 kids' names strung together. Aldemisa is a reformatted company. It is a finance, production, development company, and a worldwide sales company. Currently, we have Jay Mansfield's Cars screening in the festival here. We just wrapped production on Machete Kills, which is Robert Rodriguez directing the sequel to Machete, and we start shooting Sin City 2 October 15th. Our budget ranges go anywhere from $5 million to $60 million. We fully finance movies as well as sell them.
Great, thank you. And you also worked at Essential and Miramax. So
Yeah, no, I've been around. Let's see, where have I been? I founded Essential Entertainment, worked at Disney for 12 years, worked at Miramax, worked at Intermedia Films, and a few other places, but those are the most notable.
Great. I want to start with Jerry. Something we talk a lot about at Screen is accessing finance from new markets and emerging markets for film. And you obviously have a big Russian partnership with Alexander Rodansky, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the Russian influence and how that works.
Yes, the company Aldemisa is Russian, primarily Russian/European backed. It is, in Russia at the moment there are significant financial resources available from a number of different sources. I'm fortunate we have access to those sources. We also Alexander Rodinsky, who is one of our principals and financiers and producers. He also owns two distributors, one in Eastern Europe and one in Russia that are end users. So we don't have to worry about selling those movies there. And we are moving right along here in terms of finding, always in search of more movies. Obviously, FilmNation to a certain degree is competitive with us. We usually lose, but that's a little bit about Aldemisa.
And for FilmNation, is tapping into international finance becoming important? Has it been important? Is it something you're going to look at more?
I think in terms of where you're finding money, it depends on the project and what sort of the natural fit is. I think one of the things that we're finding really important when we finance our own movies is that soft money piece, and I know something that you guys are talking a lot about here is really critical because a lot of times it can get a movie over the hump of just barely makeable to actually makeable. So we've actually shot movies in Serbia and Hungary. We had a movie that we put together in Australia that took advantage of that producer offset, which is up to 40% of the budget. We've shot and financed a movie in Canada called House at the End of the Street. That's coming out in a couple of weeks with Jennifer Lawrence. And the Ottawa rebate was actually quite critical because even just that extra couple of percentage points is, and you guys know when you're putting the finance plans together, relying on pre-sales and some gap lending and whatnot, and then just filling that hole, and it's a really hard hole to fill just purely with equity, and the more you can stretch any one of those other pieces, the easier it gets. So we're thinking a lot about what can we do in Europe, in territories that have high production incentives, and how can we get creative because it can sometimes get it over the finish line.
And Michael, I think of Big Beach as being very American, but does any finance for those American films ever come from abroad?
No, it's actually kind of the opposite of the other two fellows. we fully finance ourselves, and I don't think at Big Beach we had ever really made a movie using foreign pre-sales. The sort of American indie ensemble comedies that we do don't translate that well over there. We always do okay in foreign sales eventually, but it's never enough that we need to go out and pre-sell them. So yeah, it's a little bit the opposite end of the spectrum. It's really not a big part of the business, and trying to figure out how to make it a part of the business is one of our goals. You look at Hollywood blockbusters, all these movies now are driven off of international ticket sales, and the type of movies that we're talking about, these very indie American movies, it's really not a piece of the puzzle. So figuring out how to translate that is one of our challenges.
I wanted to speak a little bit about, even if finance isn't coming from abroad, how important the international markets are when you're packaging a project and selling it. And obviously everybody's talking, oh yes, it's, the international box office is larger than domestic now, and it's becoming more and more important. But maybe you could put some real concrete examples of that together. Is it every film? Does the Malick film have to sell around the world to be successful in your eyes? Or that's a loaded question. I think.
There are, a couple sides to that question. One is sort of when you're putting it together, when you're making a movie at the 10 plus million, it's really, really hard to get it financed. A lot of people would say not economically, intelligent to actually just take a huge risk unless there's, you can really properly value, because the bigger the check that you're writing, obviously the more downside there is. And some of these movies, that the amount of pre-sales is hugely critical. We say we're not in the sales business, we're in the pre-sales business, because it helps people get their movies made. So if you're making a $15 million movie, that better be a large component of that. The other thing with highly pre-selling movies is that the more equity, or the less equity that you're asking for, the more kind of control that you get, and the more you can make movies the way that you want to make them. So for filmmakers like Terry, they'll approach us and they want to make the movie they want to make in as little interference as possible. And the less you can ask before you can greenlight that picture and make that movie makeable, the more they can make the movie that they want under the circumstances that they want. And that's one of the things that we try to do with filmmakers, so they keep coming back, is give them the tools to make the movie that they want to make.
Jerry, any thoughts on how important international sales are?
Well, I want to dial back one thing. No independent movie should be started or produced today without a soft money component. And I think that is really critical to everyone to understand that. I'm sure everyone in this room gets that, but whether you're shooting in one of these subsidy jurisdictions in the United States or overseas, it's critical to have that component, because you're going to need that component. In other words, to finance your movie. The second question was
just how important international is versus domestic.
Well, Milan was right. For everyone who wants to finance their movies, international pre-sales are the engine that launched this movie, and it's critical that who is it? What is the cast? Who's the director? On a Terrence Malick, I believe it's more about Terrence Malick as a director versus who's going to be in Terrence Malick's movies, because everyone knows that Terrence Malick is going to attract a certain level of cast, which he always has and always will continue to do. But also you can finance a movie not necessarily based on the critical component of cast, but it's a director as well. And for us, and for me personally, we're very, very director-driven.
I think one of the reasons why we decided to make this company Beachside was kind of in response to the international, the shift towards international and pre-sales. Is we really value content more than anything else. So if someone's coming to me and saying, look, you can only make this movie if it stars Bradley Cooper and Ryan Gosling, that's a challenge for us. We want to be able to make the script, work with the director we want in whatever capacity. So for us to say, okay, if we make this movie for under $1 million, we know that we can at least, and we're getting 30% back from Georgia or from New York State, that we know that the movie can have that content and creative integrity that we want it to have, without knowing that, okay, we're gonna have to get, maybe Ben Affleck isn't right for this part, but we need to put him in the film because that's what's going to get us those sales in Europe. So I think part of the reason why we created Beachhead is to hedge against that a little bit and try to maintain some of that focus on content rather than focus on who the talent is.
It seems like, sorry.
I'll agree with a couple of things that you guys said, and especially Jerry, when you're talking about that a director can be a selling tool. I know that a lot of times there's this impression that you need cast to sell a movie, and it's huge cast, but it really depends on a lot of factors. Sometimes you can sell a movie based on a high concept, and the idea is just so big that as long as the pricing is in line with the movie you're trying to make, that can be enough. Or if you have a really, top-tier filmmaker that buyers know are going to make something distinctive and unique, that can drive it. Again, it comes back down to pricing. If you're making a $50 million movie, you're going to need some cast. If you're making a smaller one, it can be a number of things. It can be a highly, highly visible book that has awareness. It can be, a concept. It can be a filmmaker. And it's really just getting feedback and understanding, what's the value of the elements that you have, everything from the script on up to the cast. What number should you be making that movie at, and then how do you play with those things to get yourself over the finish line? But it doesn't have to be just, get me Jason Statham and you can make your movie, and without him you can't make it based on pre-sales. It's much more nuanced and complicated. And that's why sales agencies are, early in the process are useful, because they can give you that feedback. So as you're packaging, you're saying, okay, well, I've got this actor. I know it's not enough to get it there, but what if I do this? Will that get me to the number that I need to? And if the answer is no, then you dial back and think about what other levelers you can move to get there. So when you get to that finish line, you've put together a movie that's viable, that makes sense from a distribution point of view, as opposed to just putting it together and then finding out once it's done, what do I have to make this for to make it work?
I mean, do you think valuations are pretty acceptable in the market right now? I mean, it seems that maybe before the recession, the recent recession, things were getting a little inflated and star vehicles were getting a little crazy. But do things seem at the right levels of valuation now?
Our view is, it depends on each territory. Some territories are growing rapidly, like China, Brazil, Russia. Some have obviously taken a hit with the Euro crisis and various other reasons. But we like to say it's not just that the market depresses and inflates as a whole uniformly. Kind of what we're seeing more is that trying to find that thing that works is less about kind of like, is it a good year, is it a bad year, but it's just narrowing the target. So in past years, when it was the heydays, if you missed that target of what buyers really want by a little bit, maybe your numbers go down by 5%. Today, if you miss that target, those numbers go down by 30 or 40%, which is, makes the difference between a movie getting made or not. So it's really understanding what do buyers want, what has distribution value, and then making sure that the project you're putting together fits that. So I think it's just more hitting a target as opposed to just, now I have to make everything for less.